In addition, there has been no discovery of any remains of equipment, heavy or otherwise, that could have enabled the structures to be built as they originally appear. In addition to this, the existence of pristinely hewn and fitted together internal granite stones that make up 5% of the pyramid's total structure remains an inescapable anomaly to all and generally accepted academic theories as to the manner of their construction. This is because curious watermarks are still visible today. Now, if you go to the pyramids in 2008, you can actually see some of the watermarks near the top if you look at it in the right light. But the watermarks near the bottom, they've probably been worn away because it's only up until recent years that you're not allowed to actually climb up on the pyramids. It's kind of like Stonehenge, so the watermarks probably would have been worn away over time. Yeah. The Great Pyramid, this is some more photos of me in Egypt. That's me on one of the pyramids. I managed to get up there and I climbed up probably about 10 metres and I got Shabnam to take the photo before I saw one of the guards come over and I just quickly leapt down. I think we managed to get her up there for one as well. But you get caught up there, you get in a lot of trouble. The Great Pyramid was built as a symbol of Mount Moriah, the primordial mound of creation, which resides at the center of Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, the place where Yahweh stares continually. All three pyramids at Giza were deliberately built to represent Orion's belt, chiefly represented by three major mountains in Jerusalem, Mount Moriah and Mount of Olives and Mount Zion. Did you hear what I said then? So you've got Mount Moriah, Mount of Olives and Mount Zion. The pyramid is a very, very strong structure, and it is a man-made version of symbolizing a mountain. That's why it's got that shape. That's why it's just not a normal building. The whole idea is it's actually meant to look like a mountain. The Pillar of Enoch was built with divine knowledge and was handed down to Enoch with the chief principle of 1. Teaching Torah. 2. Making man aware of his link between the physical and the spiritual realm. 3. To foretell specific points of prophetic points in time, to provide a portal from the spiritual and physical realm like Mount Moriah. Remember when Jacob's ladder? For you have set, now this is at the bottom, and this is from Jeremiah 32:20, I believe. For you have set signs and wonders in the land of Mitzrayim. That's straight out of the Bible. Even to this day, and in Israel and among other men, and you have made your name great even to this day. Now, most people think that that's talking about the plagues. Remember the plagues of signs in Egypt? The reference to this day kind of blows that out of the water. Joseph Flavius, in his Antiquity of the Jews, who's aware of Joseph Flavius? He's a Jew, but he defected to the Romans, and he was a soldier fighting for the Jewish cause, and he defected to join the Romans, and he became a historian and documented a lot of history of the Jews, and especially during the Great Revolt. In Book 1, Chapter 2, Section 9 to 10, Josephus wrote concerning the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx. You ready for this? All these proved to be of good dispositions. They also inhabited the same country without dissensions, and in a happy condition, without any misfortunes befalling them, till they died. They also were the inventors of that peculiar sort of wisdom which is cornered with the heavenly bodies and their order, and that their inventions might not be lost before they were sufficiently known upon Adam's prediction that the world was to be destroyed at one time by a force of fire, and another time by violence and quantity of water. They made two pillars, the one of them brick and the other stone. They inscribed their discoveries on them both, in case the pillar of brick should be destroyed by the flood, the pillar of stone might remain, and exhibit those discoveries to mankind. Also inform them that there was another pillar of brick erected by them. Now this remains in the land of Syriad in Egypt to this day. So what Joseph Flavius is telling us is that Yahweh allowed early man to make a monument of all that Yahweh plans to do from the very beginning of creation to the very end in a way that it will never be destroyed. So he allowed mankind, through Enoch, who walked with Yahweh, to make, he was one of the righteous Tzaddikim of his generation, to make something that would never be destroyed. There's a saying, and the saying is that all things fear time. Time fears one thing, the pyramids. That means that these were never going to be destroyed. I'll put my hand in my heart right now, and I'll tell you that the pyramids will never be destroyed. They're looking pretty raggedy at the moment, but they will never be destroyed. They will never be destroyed. And you'll find out why I'm saying that, hopefully in such a sure manner very soon. In that day there should be... Now listen, this is from Isaiah 19, verse 19 to 20. In that day there shall be an altar to Yahweh in the midst of the land of Mitzrayim, in the land of Egypt, and standing in the corner, and a standing column at its border to Yahweh, and it shall be on it a sign for a witness to Yahweh of hosts, Zavaot, in the midst of the land of Egypt. And reference to its border means the border of Israel. So where's the border of Israel, biblical Israel? From the river Euphrates to the river Nile. Yeah. And so what's sitting at the center but on the border? What is it the center of? It's the center of the world. The three pyramids that are built in the Giza Plateau, that's the navel of the world. That's the center of the world. They're built in the center of the world, yet on the border of the land of Israel. That's pretty frightening. That's pretty startling revelation. The outer mantle of the Great Pyramid is composed of, you ready for it? 144,000 casing stones. Where have you heard that figure before? Which was symbolic of the end time 144,000 saints, according to Revelation 7, 2 and 4. Now let's talk about the absence of the capstone, as I'm going to call it, just for the time being. It's all right. I love you, Mark. The absence of the capstone in the Great Pyramid is very significant. Psalm 118, verse 22 to 23 says, "The stone that the builders rejected has become the Rosh Pinah, the cornerstone of the corner, or the stone of the corner. This is Yahweh's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes." That's from Psalm 118, verse 22 to 23. And Matthew 21, 43 to 44 says, "Therefore I say to you, the kingdom of Yahweh shall not be taken from you and given to people bringing forth the fruits of it. And whoever shall fall on this stone shall be broken, but on whomever it shall fall, it will grind him to powder, and they will be broken apart," according to Matthew 21, verse 43 to 44. So interestingly, the pyramid is the only structure to have its capstone or principal stone at the very center of the structure. No other structure that has a significant, whether it be a linking stone, whether it be a foundation stone, no other structure has a stone that's significant at the very center of its actual shape. Now, it's important that I stipulate that this stone, the whole structure is not dependent upon this stone in this case, like a support stone or a linking stone. Because, and I'll get to that because I don't want to jump ahead. I was about to jump ahead, but I'm not going to. Now, when we look at the Great Pyramid itself, the Great Pyramid, the prophetic timeline encoded within the measurements of the Great Pyramid of Giza, also cited in the teachings of false prophet and founder of the Jehovah's Witness movement, Charles Taze Russell, is derived from its geometrical features. Isaiah 19:19 statement that there shall be an altar to Yahweh in the midst or the middle of the land, and a standing column at the border to Yahweh is supported in Jeremiah 32:20, which speaks of Yahweh setting signs and wonders in the land of Egypt even to this day. And as I said, even the inclusion of even to this day stumps those who believe it's referring to the plagues of Egypt. The pyramid is the only serious contender as being Yahweh's witness that we've cited. It is literally a storehouse of scientific, historical, and prophetic truth with a testimony that is in perfect accord with Scripture sitting in the geographical center of the world. That monument stands in a more important physical situation than any other building erected by man. cited by Henry Mitchell, the chief hydrographer of the United States Survey Team in 1868. And to say that the Great Pyramid was built as a tomb is like saying Buckingham Palace was built as a toilet block. Every feature of the Great Pyramid's architecture as the Holy Temple is supremely important because it outlines Yahweh's plan of the ages. The Great Pyramid represents the plan of Yahweh, completed by Messiah Yeshua, who is the precious cornerstone, according to Isaiah 28:16. Zechariah 4:7 refers to its placement at the top of the completed monument as saying, "He shall bring forth the headstone of it with shouts of favour to it." So just quickly, I'm going to probably go through this anyway. This here represents the slow, gradual decline of man since Adam. Thanks. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. Here represents the slow, gradual decline of man from Adam. And this actually goes, I don't know where it goes to. Sorry about that. Then when you get to here, you see that there's a thing called an ascending passage, and there is a plug there, and that represents the covenant of the so-called Old Testament. And when you actually ascend this passage, if you're claustrophobic, you're gone. You literally have to crawl up it like this, and it's not very wide. And I really had issues going up it. So did Rabbi Rob Miller and Maury, and all of us we just kept talking to take our minds off it. But it's interesting, if you have a look at the grotto here, and I'll use this. This is meant to signify Gehenna. And there's been an explosion in Gehenna. If you go down there and actually get to have a look at photos of it on the web, there looks like there's been an explosion out of this grotto, and there's actually been something that's actually come up through the bottom out of this explosion, and it's come and broken through, and there's literally a hole that looks like it's been blown through the floor in this ascending passage. And this represents Messiah's death and resurrection. And then as soon as you get past this hole that's exploded come out of the ground, the bottom of the passage, you can now walk upright into a section, what's known as the gallery, and the ceiling's massive. And you make your way up, and so straight away you go, "Oh, phew, I'm glad I got to here. You're fine now." You make your way up, and then you come into this sort of leveled off piece and part, and you actually have to bow 3 times before you go into this little room completely made of granite, and that signifies the tribulation, having to bow down 3 times before you get in there. And the actual size of what's called the King's Chamber is the exact dimension of the Holy of Holies. And inside the King's Chamber there's a coffin, but the coffin looks like it's for a child, like a place where somebody was laid to rest. Not a coffin, but like a little holding thing for some body to be put in. And there was no body ever put in it. It's actually the same dimensions as the Ark of the Covenant. Interestingly, an Arabian by the name of Caliph al-Mamun, who was ignorant of the official entrance to the Great Pyramid, forced an entry in hopes of finding treasure, and in so doing paralleled the famous passage in Scripture, "I tell you the truth, the man who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber," according to John 10:1. The Great Pyramid has only one entrance passage. Once inside the pyramid, one will immediately notice that the interior is predominantly made up of granite. This represents the gold as it is used in the Holy Temple. Thus the granite represents set apartness, and the limestone represents that which is not set apart, or which is common. I don't know why I had that there again, probably to refer to it and not go too far. Now here's when you just go into the ascending passage. There's the plug that represents the Old Covenant, as I hesitantly call it, and we go up this very confined ascending passage until we get to that explosion in the ground, and then we can stand upright because Messiah has been resurrected. And that's the passage as you crouching along it. So it's very, very claustrophobic. The huge granite plug stopping access to the first ascending passage represents the original covenant with the absence of the law of return. That's why the plug's there. It's the only difference. Of the adulterous bride Israel until the proclamation of the new covenant in Jeremiah 31. Upon going inside the Great Pyramid, though the Caliph al-Mamun passage through the Caliph-il-Amun passage, and that's the one you have to go to get in there. So you don't even go in the right entrance when you get in there. You go past the plug before you make the ascent toward the Grand Gallery. This ascent was very confined and will cause you to walk in a perpetual bow until you reach the Grand Gallery. Now that's the Grand Gallery, and I was trying to get a good photo of it, because you're not allowed to take photos in there. That's why I've got no photos of me in there. So this must have been somebody who got away with it, or somebody who had permission. But I was really annoyed that we weren't allowed to take photos in there. But there must have been some reason for it. John Mortimer Edgar wrote in Volume 1 of his book, The Great Pyramid Passages and Chambers, that based upon the work of Professor Smith, many able-bodied minds have been awakened to search into the various problems presented by the Great Pyramid. Some of these investigators have claimed not only that it embodies great scientific truths, but also that it sets forth symbolically and by measurement the divine plan of salvation, that in fact it is messianic. This volume was first published in 1910 and circulated among Jehovah's Witnesses, who were called at that time Bible students. The book's distribution within this movement ceased in 1928. So the founder of the Jehovah's Witness movement, he was a mad nut on the subject of the Great Pyramids. Yes, he was a false prophet and it was a false religious movement, but he was spot on about citing the pyramid as having some association or being completely associated with the divine plan of creation. This is going up the gallery, and then you go through and you have to bow 3 times before you come into the King's Chamber. The Grand Gallery leads up an entirely granite room called the King's Chamber. At one end is an object known as the Coffer, there it is there, which is an object that is an exact volume of the Ark of the Covenant with the dimensions described in Scripture as 2.5 cubits by 1.5 cubits by 1.5 cubits. And there's the inches equivalent there. This will be the resting place of the Ark of the Covenant that will no longer be remembered, according to Jeremiah 3:16. Read with me. And it shall come to pass, when you multiplied and increased in the land, in those days, says Yahweh, they shall say no more the Ark of the Covenant or the Brit of Yahweh, neither shall it come to mind, neither shall they remember it, neither shall they visit it, neither shall that ritual be done anymore. Why will it not be remembered? Now, it will be remembered. The text doesn't mean that everybody's going to forget that it ever existed. But what it's saying there is that it's no longer going to be required. Why is it going to no longer be required? Does anybody want to answer that?
The elements will be out of it.
The
elements will be out of it.
No? Yes, but no. The answer is because Yeshua is going to be with us. Why would we need the Ark of the Covenant when we've actually got Yeshua here physically with us, ruling and reigning on the throne? Do you know what I mean? Yet it will be put in this place that was built in the age of Enoch, in the pre-flood age. It will be put nicely away in this thing, and people will be allowed to come and visit it and have a look in monument style, the history and the story of creation. The Ark of the Covenant will no longer be significant in people's minds because the physical presence of the real capstone, which is Yeshua, our King, who will rule and reign during the great millennium, this time will not be the be-all, end-all age, but the final trial period, if you will, before the final restoration of the new heaven and new earth. So the millennial reign of King Messiah Yeshua, that isn't the world to come. That's still a provisional time, ladies and gentlemen. There still will be death, but the average lifespan will be 800 to 900 years old. And as we know by the book of Isaiah, anybody that's lost a loved one, particularly mothers or fathers who have lost children, their children will be returned to them from the borders of the land, and they will be allowed to raise their children who died in this age up to ages of, like I said, 800 or 900 years. So I know which generation I'd probably prefer to bring my kids up in that generation. So that's something that somebody who might have lost a child can look forward to and get a lot of comfort out of. With an understanding of the Great Pyramid's true significance, verses throughout Scripture come to life like never before. Psalm 111:4, he has made a memorial for his wonders. Job 38:5 and 6, do you know who determined the dimensions or who stretched out the measuring line across it? On who laid its cornerstone? What was he talking about? He was talking about the constellation, wasn't he? And so we know that the pyramids actually are arranged in a way that mimics the constellation. The triangle represents the capstone the builders rejected, or the cornerstone. It represents stability and holiness. It represents Messiah. The Kohanim knew this to be true. So what have I been trying to do all this time? I've been trying to focus your attention on the triangle, on what it really means. and I'm focusing your attention on one of the greatest wonders ever been created by man on the face of the earth, which is made up in the form of a three-dimensional triangle, a pyramid. And this very structure is something that is completely all about us. And it's not about the Egyptians. See, that's another subplant by the enemy. That when you look at the pyramids, you think that they were built by Hebrew slaves. And they were tombs, extravagant tombs for dead pharaohs. That's a lie. And you only have to do a tiny little bit of research, and I'm really just skimming the surface of all this for you, to work out that this is true. And there's plenty of verses that support that there is this such monument like this in the land of Mitzrayim in Egypt. It's absolutely fascinating stuff. Let me just find my place and we'll finish it up here. I think we're just about finished. So Yeshua is the stone the builders rejected, which has become the cornerstone. Now that's in Acts 4:11. Can you guys see? You can feel free to move the chairs back if you want. Now that's in Acts 4:11, right? I want my microphone. As the corner of the pyramids, as the cornerstone of the pyramid sits over its exact center, King Messiah Yeshua sits over the head of the body of Messiah. He is the centerpiece of all that we are aiming to do. Now, what's interesting about the seal of the Illuminati, or the Eye of Horus in the triangle, which is a symbol of the Illuminati, I don't know if anybody of you noticed this, but their seal, they have a left eye. What does left signify? Judgment, yeah. So they've got a left eye inside the triangle. Now behold, the eye of Yahweh is upon them that fear him, upon them that hope for his mercy, according to Psalm 33:18. So what side should the eye be in the triangle, if we know it's meant to be a good image? It should be the right eye, the eye of mercy. Has anybody heard the expression, I've got my eye on you? What does that mean? That means I'm watching you very intently. The enemy wants to take away, they want to take the scriptures away from you. They're loving the fact that books from the New Testament are getting rejected by Nazarenes, by Messianics, not just Christians, but by Messianics who reckon they know a little bit better than the Christians. He wants you to sell up your own territory, your own refuge, your own haven, your own salvation. Little bit by little bit, he wants you to sell up that territory that has been given to you as a down payment by faith through Abraham, who is our father and who is all in all. Don't give it away. Don't be frightened by, numerology, the numbers have everything. We know the same thing as gematria, which is the numerology, the number system in the Hebraic language. We don't get spooked by that sort of thing. We're Nazarene Israelites. It's all from us. The wizard's wand. It's from the Torah pointer when the rabbi's reading one day. This is how the wand came about, ladies and gentlemen. There was a rabbi reading from the Torah scroll with his Torah pointer, and somebody is sick, and he turned and he said, he did the bracha, he did the healing over them, refuah shalema, and he waved the Torah pointer and they were healed. And then the pagan looks at that and goes, I'm going to use a wand, I'm going to use a stick to do my magic. The enemy hasn't got an original bone in their body. The wizard that you see, Dumbledore or Gandalf the Grey in Lord of the Rings, what is the wizard modelled after? It's modelled after the medieval rabbi who was forced to wear a pointed hat by his host nation that were belittling them and threatening to do pogroms on them if they didn't wear the right attire. And he would constantly be found in the proximity of Torah scrolls and burning incense in his study, which looked very much like a laboratory. Excalibur comes from the story of Moses, who was forced to pull the rod out of Jethro's garden, and nobody else could pull it out. We've been hoodwinked, you've been hijacked, and you need to have the truth back, because the truth is stranger than fiction. It's more interesting than fiction. And it's all there to be studied and to be looked at and pondered over. So what am I getting at? We know that the cornerstone... Now listen, if we look at Acts 4:11, the Greek says, kafal is gone, which means the head of the corner. So literally in the Greek, it doesn't say stone there at all. So it says in the Greek, Yeshua is the stone you builders rejected, which is the head of the corner. Now, it can't be the cornerstone, because the cornerstone is not the head. It can't be a headstone for a cemetery, because a headstone is not necessarily a cornerstone. That's probably the best contender we've got. The capstone is both a head and a corner. Would you agree that's a corner? Would you agree that it's a head? Yes. And somebody said, I think it was Mark, no disrespect, Mark. Mark said, well, that's not dependent. The whole structure is not dependent on that. That's the whole point. How could the builders leave Mark alone? Mark's on fire. Leave him alone. I'll punch you in the face. The whole point is that actual finishing part of the structure, the rest of it isn't dependent on that. Because how could the builders of the Torah actually build and reject something if their whole building was dependent on that capstone? So the fact that it isn't dependent on that, it can be built without the capstone, supports that being the symbolic structure of the plan of salvation even more. Because yes, the scribes and the Pharisees, the men who got a bit full of themselves, they were doing the lower portion of that, but they were denying what it all pointed to, that upper capstone, that King Messiah Yeshua that it all pointed to. It's amazing symbolism, and if you sit down and think about it, it will really do a number on you. So the stone which the builders refused has become the head of the corner, according to Psalm 118 verse 22. So Rosh is head and Pinah is corner. Yeshua was rejected, and so was the final stone of the Pillar of Enoch rejected. If you study the history of the Great Pyramid in Egypt, there was never a capstone on the top, ever. Why? Because Yeshua is the capstone, and he's not come back yet. Many cite that the cornerstone is actually a keystone. The keystone is a supporting stone. The only problem with this is, how can builders reject a keystone? They can't without the keystone. They don't have a structure at all without the keystone. They have no building. We know this isn't true because trillions of people throughout the ages have observed the building, that is the Torah, and received blessings without knowing that the head of everything they're doing is Messiah. Now, the correct name for the crowning piece of a pyramid is not technically called a capstone, though use of the capstone is permissible according to definition, but actually it is a very general term which could be applied to an actual cap-like shape, like the lid of a top of a tomb. The actual name for such a stone is specific. The uppermost piece of the capstone of a pyramid is called a pyramidion. Pyramidia plural. And the tip of the pyramid, also the tip of the obelisk, is called a ben-ben. This is the same word that the ancient Egyptians used for the cone-shaped bread. Usually when a pyramid was constructed, the top part, or the capstone, also called the top stone, was the last thing to be placed on it. It was considered the most important part of the pyramid and was made of a special stone or even gold. According to the Giza Pyramid website, the Hebrew description of this stone is function-based, describing corner and head. Remember, I said the Hebrew language is a concrete language and it's a function-based language, whereas Greek is just a descriptive, surface description language, and it's, what's the word? I said it before. Not concrete, it's solid. No, it's abstract. That's the word I was looking for. All right, and so that was part one of a part two teaching. Next week we're going to, and I'm sorry, Chaim, who's tuned in, because he spoke to me, Rev Shabbat, and he wanted to tell me some additional things about the Berakat Kohanim, the priestly blessing, because it was going to be it's part of the subject, believe it or not. But there's far too much information to do in one lecture, so we're going to look at that next week. Thank you very much for coming out. Big turnout today. It's good to see everybody. Had a rough week, and I'm sure not the only one, but we're here, and that's the main thing. And praise be to Yahweh. Thank you so much, Tom, for what you did today. I really appreciate it. And thanks for coming out. Thank you for tuning in, those of you who tuned in. Is there any questions about what we looked at today? So I'm not saying that the seals on the American $1 bill are good. I'm not saying that. Yes, they're probably to do with the Illuminati or some secret society. But what I'm saying is the actual symbolism of the eye and the triangle was originally something that had everything to do with us. And it was hijacked. So if you see a triangle or you see an eye behind it, 9 times out of 10 it is going to be an Illuminati thing, isn't it? But you know that that's actually the original pure connotation of that, which will occur again. And that's why we're going to look at the Aaronic blessing, because one of the traditions of the Jews, they had several ways they held their hands doing the Aaronic blessing, which Chaim was telling me about, and one sect chose to have the blessing with the eye and the triangle. So when I do the Aaronic blessing, according to the custom, I think Chabad actually do it this way. The fingers are in that shape, and it's over the right eye. It's not the left eye, because that's judgment, but it's over the right eye. And I go through and I've got to make sure I look at everybody as I'm doing the bracha. Why am I doing this? And I'm giving away what I'm going to be sharing next week, because this is Yeshua. That's Yeshua. That's Yeshua. So I'm basically, the capstone that the builders rejected, look at them all. There's a whole line of them doing it. So we're just basically taking a perception that we once had, and we're actually seeing the origins of that, and they were originally for good. Are there any questions or comments or anything? Any questions or comments? Yes, John?
Are you saying so the Great Pyramid that you went to, it doesn't have a capstone?
No, it doesn't have a capstone at all.
It looks like
Yeah, no, it does from a distance, but no, not at all. In fact, the top of the pyramid is probably half the size of this room. It's just a massive structure. Imagine if it did. Oh, it's gone. Oh, where is a pyramid? There you go. That's it there. That's the, no. That's the bigger one, yeah. That's the big one there. That's right. The little one has the outer granite. Now, this outer granite casing, see this outer granite casing? This is what the outer portion, the outer part of the pyramids was all originally. It wasn't this jagged stone that's all been worn away. And it's this second pyramid, I believe. I think it's the second pyramid. It actually has still some of the casing near the top. Now, this casing was actually polished to such a high degree that it was a mirror. It was like looking into a mirror. It was granite that was polished so intensely that it was polished to the actual consistency of a mirror. So they would have looked so otherworldly and technologically advanced in their heyday, and I believe that Yahweh's going to restore them when He gets everything sorted out. Because the whole earth is a jagged landscape. It's like somebody who's got very bad acne. The whole surface of the entire world is a devastated surface. It shouldn't look like that. The actual, in the millennial reign, it'll be all restored to a beautiful land, which won't be like Canberra. You know, Canberra's got one row of trees and they're all the same. And it's all man-made and it's all Masonic. But it's the landscape we see today is just a shadow of what it normally should be. We're going to have species of animals that we've never seen return to the face of the earth, vegetations that we've never seen. It's just going to be amazing. There's all sorts of things that the sages and the rabbis talk about that will be available in the Messianic age that is just bizarre. And it's interesting to read about that. It's great to read about. Even though it might be speculation, it's educated speculation. Jews don't come up with things out the top of their head. But it's good to think upon what are the awesome things that are going to be ahead of us, even though no amount of conversation what we could do will do it justice with the glory that's going to be ahead of us. There's not a pleasure in the world, even all the pleasures in the world that have existed from the beginning of man to now, can equate to how the pleasures one individual will feel on that scale. So it's pretty amazing. So there's no other questions, no other comments. Nobody online wants to say anything? Tell me the pyramids are pagan. Well, if you think of anything, you think of it over some dinner. We've got plenty of food. We'll get that food organised now. And please stay if you're hungry, you want to have some early dinner. You guys are heading off, please? Please stick around if you can. more the merrier. But thanks again, and I'll see everybody, Yahweh willing, next week. So Shavuot Tov, everyone. Baruch Hashem.
Jan also won the prize.
So we only got 5? That's a bit disappointing. You got 6, so you got closest.